Well, hello, friends and family. Thank you for joining me on the Sisters Trust. Well, I'm excited about being here today. This is the second time since I've been back, and I was thinking, I need to teach as I'm learning. And I believe the last time when I was on here, I was talking about how our First Lady is trying to teach us how to dig a little bit deeper. So I'm going to start studying today about one of the women of the Bible. And actually, I never heard of her until we actually start studying it out. Looking for the contents, really trying to understand and learn what happened back then. Women went through a whole bunch in that day. And there's still a lot of things that women go through today, right? And it's amazing how we just make it through. It's like we got that little extra strength just to pull you through because you always kind of holding on to the future. Even when we're sick, we don't want to kind of dwell where we at the moment. We kind of always want to be optimistic and think about what the future is going to bring. So the woman we're going to talk about tonight, her name is Tamar. And I've never heard of her until we started studying her out. And it's amazing, her story. It takes two to make a story. And no matter how you read something, we always could take away something different. What I'm thinking about right now is even when I was in the group Bible talk discussion with some of the women, they was really encouraged by her. And it took me a little bit later to see the encouragement because, a lot of times we get stuck on the things that stand in front of us, like, sin, deceit, and different things of that nature. But before I get too much talking about that, I just want to encourage you as we start learning more and more about these women of the Bible, really put yourself in their places. We're not that much different. We don't have some of the same roles, but it kind of comes down to the same things of consequences and the choices that we make that makes the consequences, right? The life that we try to live, how hard it is for women. But we have to stick together in the sisterhood to make it, to be stronger. The thing that's different about today's time, we can always pick up a phone and we could call each other when we're in need. We don't have to be alone. And that's the cool thing about reading some things about the past, that we can make today's time and, make things better for each other now in the future. But anyway, before I get talking too much, I'm gonna read you a little bit about, because this is a part of Jesus lineage. This is about how Jesus came about. And if you read, I'm gonna read Matthew 1 and just get us down to where she starts her life. So it says Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. So it's telling us a little bit about where we're going to be going and how Jesus came about. Okay. It says Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Okay, so Judah is the father, and the mother was Tamar. Now it kind of took me back all this. Before I get into it, I'm going to read the story, and you will see what I'm saying. Because they did a lot of things back there so much different than what we do today, right? And that's why a lot of times when we read things, it says in those days, because a lot of things that they did in those days, we do not, follow those things, nor do we have those things in our lives. And so just to give you a little bit of background, in those days, they had different laws and stuff that they stuck by. One was called the Liber, and it's like a Latin, and so as I'm learning, I want you guys also, if you see something that you want to talk about, let me know. Also, if you're seeing something to add to the story when you do your research, put it in the comments so we could talk about it. And back there, when they did it, spelled Levir, Levir, and that stood for husband's brother. Okay. Also, they had I think it was liberate, and that was another custom, which was a practice in order to, it was like a practice in order to stay a part of the family or continue the relationship between your present groups. That was the initial and the original marriage. So those was like some of the customs. They believed in when you marry or you remarry, you had to stay in the same clan. What I noticed was, even though it says customs, it also strongly follows by the word law. Okay. It might said you should do something, but it also was followed by must. And then also I noticed that if it says, you should, or if such, or you have rights, it's also followed by duty. So really, it's like things are strongly suggested of how you should live and how your life should be, right? So that's just a little bit of backstory of what they go through at depth. So I'm gonna read for you, I think it's Genesis chapter 38. Let me go there. And it's going to tell you a little bit about the story, okay? Then that way we'll know why I was kind of taken back a little bit, because I'm glad we don't live in an age where it says in those times, okay? So Genesis chapter 38, verses 1, it says, at that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man in Adullam named Hiram. There Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shura. He married her and made love to her, and she became pregnant. She gave birth to a son who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son who was named Onan. She gave birth still to another son who was named Shelah. It was at Keziv that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and named was Tamar. Okay, so right here is where Tamar is going to come into the story. It says that Judah had got a wife for his son They spelled it E-R, so and her name was Tamar. That was Judah's firstborn, from the Canaanite woman. Okay. It says, but Judah's son, his firstborn, was very wicked in the Lord's eyes. So the Lord put him to death. Okay. So was very wicked in God's eyes. So God put him to death. Okay. And he had just got a new wife, Tamar, which is the woman in the Bible that we're talking about tonight. That the father-in-law name was Judah. Okay, so I want you to remember that his name was Judah. Okay. Then Judah said to Onan, sleep with your brother's wife, and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to raise up an offspring for your brother. So Judah told his son Onan to sleep with Tamar, so that she can have a son, and so she can have a child, and so that the offspring will grow up but it would still be under, for the brother, which I never really understood that, because it's still the same family. But the child will be known as the brother's child. So that's just the customs that they had back then, right? It said, but Onan knew that the child would not be his. So whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground and to keep from providing the offspring for his brother. I'm just realizing something. It never said that Judah had him to marry Tamar. He just had him to sleep with him, so that, because Tamar is now a widow, right? And so I guess with Onan sleeping with her, I don't know what they was trying to do, but it was supposed to be so that this baby would be known as the brother's kid. Okay, but Onan knew that, and so every time he slept with this Tamar, he made sure that she did not get pregnant. Okay. It says what he did. So what he did was wicked in the Lord's sight. So the Lord put him to death also. So evidently, he just kept sleeping with Tamar, not producing no offsprings. And the Lord looked at that was evil in his sight, and he also was put to death. So you got this Tamar, she became a widow. Her husband died because he was evil and wicked. And then she got this brother-in-law sleeping with her. And then he died because he wasn't even trying to have an offspring, because he knew it would represent the brother, right? And so they both was wicked. So they was both taken off this earth and was killed because of their wickedness. It said, then Judah said to his daughter-in-law, Tamar, live as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah grows up. So now you got Judah telling her to go back home and live at her father's house until the other son grows up. Who knows how old this son is, and how old is Tamar? That's another story in itself, to research and see how old these people are in this time. Because I think they started doing things much earlier than we even start in our today's time. And so it says, for he thought that he might too die just like his brothers. So he had reservation that, I don't know if he mean like if he married tomorrow, if she might die too, because the other two died. I don't know. But he sent her away thinking that the baby son might die too. Okay, so Tamar went to live with her father in her father's household. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shurah, died. Okay, so now Judah's wife died. It said when Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Tamar to the men were shearing his sheep. So Tamar, where the men were shearing his sheep, he went there once he started grieving, and his friend Harar, the Adullamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, your father-in-law is on his way to Tamar to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil as a and disguised herself, and went down and sat at the entrance of Enom, which is one of the roads by Tamar. For she saw that, thought Shelah had grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. So now Tamar went and disguised herself with a veil at the end of some road, because she know that Shelah have not been given to him, just like Judah promised that was going to be her husband, right? So she went and disguised herself. When Judah saw her, he thought that she was a prostitute. for she was covered, her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went up to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." And what will you give me to sleep with you? She asked. "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," he said. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know, maybe those goats was expensive back then, but I don't know about sleeping with somebody for a goat. But she said that's what he got to give her, right? And then it says, "Will you give me something else as a pledge until you send it?" she asked. He said, "What pledge should I give you? Your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand," she answered. So she at least had some good sense to get something left instead of waiting for him, even though he looking at her as a prostitute and talking about he's going to pay. He was going to pay later with the goat. Now I think about it, okay, let's skip that. So she said, he promised her some things, but she said that she wanted some items like right now. So she was pretty smart to at least get something in her hands, even though she might have to give it back, get something in her hands until this so-called goat show up. Okay. So she said, so he gave them to her and she slept with him and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put back on her widow's clothes again. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adulamite, in order to get his pledge back from her. He asked the men who lived there, "Where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road in Edom?" "There wasn't any shrine prostitute here," they said. And so he said, "I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said, there hasn't been a shrine prostitute here." Then Judah said, "Let her keep what she has, or will become the laughing stock." After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her. After 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar was guilty of prostitution, and as a result is now pregnant." Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." Okay, y'all hear what's going on, right? He said, bring her out and have her burnt to death because she was found as a prostitute and now is pregnant. Okay. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owned these," she said. As she added, see if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff there are." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her my son Shelah, and he did not sleep with her again." When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one put out his hand and said, one put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it up around his wrist and said, "This one came out first." But when he drew his hand back, his brother came out, and she said, "So this is how you broke out." And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and his name was Zerah. Zerah, Zerah. They had some hard names back then, didn't they? Well, anyway, this was a tough story for me. Two things about it, because this is how Jesus got here, right? This is from his genealogy, how before we get to talk about Abraham, it was talking about Isaac, and it talked about Judah and his brothers, and then it talked about Judah's sons, which is the twins that was from Tamar, right? They didn't even mention, those, that's how the lines kept going from Tamar's sons. I was kind of taken back because the fact that she had the kids from Judah, who was the father-in-law, number one. I think I was stuck on that. I was stuck on, it said that Judah was the one that found the husband for which was his firstborn. And his firstborn was wicked in the Lord's eyes, so the Lord killed him. He died. So then Judah gave Tamar to the second son, not even in marriage, but just for him to sleep with her. And he died because he was wicked. Evidently he kept sleeping with her, knowing good well he was not going to produce the line to keep the line going for the family. He slept with her, but he made sure that she would never get pregnant, because he knew that that baby would be a part of the lineage of his brothers, which was And then Judah turned around and promised Tamar to have his third son. So he told her to go back home, and when Shelah grew up, he was gonna give him to her in marriage. And see, back then in those days, evidently they stuck a lot of with the lineage, how being a part of family. We learned that they had the what was it? The Lever, which was brother's wife, the brother. And then let's see. And then we learned that they did that practice, which was, staying married with the clan. In order for them to have a relationship and stay in the family, I guess to be remembered, they had to marry in the clan. So if a brother died or the husband died, it was the duty of the brother to either marry that wife or to have that wife conceived to carry on the brother's lineage, the firstborn. And it had to be from the original marriage, the original family. They also had like the leverage marriage is mentioned in the Bible as a standard marriage regulation among the ancient Hebrews. They had a lot going on back then. I had a lot of other notes. I was trying to think what else I had. I put down that it was a strong practice by the societies, which strong clan structured. Marriage outside the clan was forbidden. So I remember saying at the beginning, they said words like, you should, but it was followed by must. Or it was your rights to do this, but it really was followed by duty. So you really didn't have that much choice. So I don't know, I would imagine like today's, if you don't have a job, some people are housewives, right? And don't get me wrong, raising a family, that's a real job. But I would imagine if you're raising a family back then, or you didn't have any kids to raise, what do that mean for you? Like, where can, who takes care of you? Because, the man still was kind of in control. And to be a part, you had to follow those rules. So if you never produced a kid, now what do that mean for you? I mean, I think with this study, with the story of Tamar, it's still more to really research, to grab on to. It's a lot we can still learn about that. Like, do that, like here, is that be considered like a homeless person, or how do they make it? Do they have no land? It's a lot of things, women have come a long way. I touched on some of the things. It's to me, it was bothering me that she had to go through a lot of deceit just to have a kid. I mean, she slept with her father-in-law, you know. She disguised herself as a prostitute, right? She was going to be killed because she was pregnant. He didn't even have, to me, had concern the fact that, hey, this was my daughter-in-law. She maybe did the wrong thing, made some wrong choices. She got pregnant. She was acting as a prostitute. But what did he say? Bring her out and burn her to death, until he found out that he was the father. So little things, even though, we can get into a discussion with that all in its own, things like that bothers me, just the fact of how she was treated. And on her end, she did use, trickery to get what she needed to be a part of the family. That's a whole problem, another study in itself, like what was so important. But before I get on those type of tangents, let's think about if she had not done the things that she did, who would be in that lineage? Because if we go back to, let's see, what was it, Matthew chapter 1? Let me see. Okay, so we found out that Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, which was her kids, Tamar. And, after them, Perez was the father of Haran, and Haran the father of Ram. We still get down to Boaz, which was that's with Ruth and all that. So more women that we're going to study about. But just think about, what if she never did that? Would Jesus would have been here? I'm sure whatever God got the plan is what's going to happen. But this is happening through their bloodline, right? And it makes me think about, sin is always everywhere. Like it says, let me see, Romans chapter 3. Let's go there. Okay, so chapter 3, let's see, verse 20, I think 3. Let's see what it says in 24. So they help me put these glasses on, I can see better. Because we all have sinned and fallen short, right? And we all need to be thankful that God sent Jesus to die for us and help us. But in chapter 20, Romans 3, chapter 23 and 24, it says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and all are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came from Christ Jesus. And I'm going to read verse 25. It said, God presents Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. I'm going to keep on going. It says, he did this to demonstrate his righteousness, because in his forbearance he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. So just with reading that part of it, he had left the sins excuse me, beforehand. I couldn't even think of what I want to say, unpunished. So think about, God sending Jesus to them. They were separated so that the sin, he would demonstrate through faith, just to giving us that grace, right? We could get stuck on, but that's the whole point of Jesus coming. It was a lot of sin. It's a lot of sin in today's time. And we just so, just we need to be so grateful that he did send Jesus to die for us and to take care of us and to atone for us. Blood was shed so that we can make it, and those people had a lot going on. They couldn't really, I'm thinking the women back then couldn't really support themselves at this time. And, because, today's time, women be like, I can do it by myself. I don't need a man. You know how they get, or how we could get at times, independent. And we have so much today that we don't have to settle, or we don't have to disguise ourselves for different ways. But, maybe she did that, but maybe somebody in today's time tricked somebody in a marriage, or whatever the case may be. So I don't want to just look at what her faults are, but look at the hardship that she had. Because when I was in that group, I could tell that a lot of women wanted to celebrate who she was, because I heard the undertone of, kind of like, poor thing, she was promised these marriages so she could stay a part of the family, so she could be taken care of. And she had one husband that died, the second person wasn't producing, the third person was promised to her, and she would get mistreated. Everybody was sleeping with her, but she was getting the raw end of the deal. And we wasn't looking at also, what she was also doing. And she had to always go all the way to deceit just to have a kid, and end up having 2 kids. But they're in the history before Jesus came. So we don't ever know what the backstory is and how things happen. But we could take those examples and make choices for our own lives to be better. And we're going to always have different struggles in our lives, but we have each other that we can call each other. Wouldn't it have been better if they would have had cell phones back then? Or somebody say, hey, come and pray with me. Or can I stay at your house? They didn't have that, right? From what my understanding. And in this story, we could probably search so much more just to see why it was back then and why things are the way it was. And when we think of how bad we have it today, sometimes some things is no comparison of what went on back then. So I'm gonna leave you with that. I hope you like the story of Tamar, because like I said, I never even heard of her, but she's a very important person in the Bible, because number one, her name was mentioned. Number two, she's a part of Jesus' family that, got down to making him to be possible for his bloodline, right? And even though she did whatever it is that she did, that particular bloodline could have stopped right then, because there was no more kids to be talking about, right? I want to read a prayer that was sent to me. And who was that? That from one of my friends, Vicky. And let's see where her text message is. I love when people send me prayers or encouragements and everything. It kind of like, it soothes my soul that, people that be thinking about me. And let's see, I think it was on her text message, or was it her little Facebook? Let's see, hold on. But yeah, I love getting stuff from people just to be encouraging. It encourages me. And I love to encourage others. Okay. Okay, here's that prayer. And it was titled A Prayer of Hope. It says, Dear God, when I stand at the beginning of a new day, bless me with vision to see the best of things to come, wisdom to make good decisions, and most of all, faith that you are walking with me every step of the way. Amen. Thank you, Vicki, for sending me that prayer. That's awesome. And then I also, before I came on, I received a text message from one of my friends who's always, her name is Sunny. I love her so much. I've known her, I think, over 15 years. She always have a giving heart, always serving. And she got a text from somebody to ask for prayer. So I'm going to read it to you guys, and then maybe you guys can put it on your prayer list. It was something that she had received from a dear friend. It says, please pray for my baby Joanna June. She was born with a hole in her heart. She had several surgeries during her life. She has several DRS from all around the country have coordinated a very complex surgery to take place May the 3rd. Her family is requesting as much prayer as possible. Thank you. So if you guys can keep the baby, Joanna June, on your hearts, because you have a problem with her heart, to pray for her for strength, pray for her family, just to, God to touch the hands of the doctors that's gonna give that surgery, that she can have good health, because God could do anything, right? And you can never have too much prayer. Never have too much prayer. So anyway, guys, I ain't gonna hold you guys up long. I think I kind of went over all the points. So today's woman's story was Tamar. And you could read about her in Genesis chapter 38, verses 1. I think, well, start at chapter 1, go to the end of the chapter. And their lineage, where it shows about where Jesus started before Jesus got here. His family kind of started. I think that was Matthew chapter 1, right? I think it was Matthew 1, verses 1 through 13. So let me know what you think about the lesson. Let me know, you add to it, and we could have a longer discussion. And everywhere each week, I want to bring something new to you. Like I said, I want to do some exercise, talk to some different people, talk to some single women, some married women, just have different topics that we could discuss as women. So anyway, I hope you guys have a great day, the rest of your day. And thank you again for joining me on A Sister's Trust. And to God be the glory, right? You guys, y'all have a good evening. Bye.